To understand what happened on those Thessalian hills, you have to understand what the Macedonian Phalanx actually was, and why every general in the ancient world was terrified of it. Philip II of Macedon, father of Alexander the Great, had built it in the 350s BC. 16 ranks deep, each man carrying the sarissa, a pike between 5 and 7 meters long, tipped with iron, counterweighted with bronze. When the phalanx locked shields and lowered pikes, the first 5 ranks of sarissas projected past the front line. Any enemy who charged that formation was hitting a hedgehog of iron points before he could even swing his sword. At Chaeronea in 338 BC, this formation broke the sacred band of Thebes. Under Alexander, it smashed the Persian Empire at Granicus, Issus, and Gaugamela. It marched to India. It held together through the vicious wars of the successors. For a century and a half on flat ground, the phalanx was the closest thing the ancient world had to an invincible weapon. But Rome had built something different. The legion did not fight as one mass. It fought in maniples, small tactical units of about 120 men, arranged in a checkerboard pattern with gaps between them. Every legionary carried 2 pila heavy-throwing javelins, and the gladius, a short stabbing sword designed for close-quarter butchery. The maniple could break apart, reform, wheel, pivot, and refuse a flank in ways the phalanx simply could not. The question of the age was, which one wins? Nobody knew. The two systems had never met in a full, decisive battle on ground that favored neither. In the summer of 197 BC, that was about to change. Philip V of Macedon had spent years fighting Rome across Illyria and Greece, the Second Macedonian War, sparked by his alliance with Hannibal during the Second Punic War. Rome had not forgotten. Now, with Carthage broken, Rome had turned east. Titus Quinctius Flamininus, 30 years old, consul, Philhellene, and one of the most gifted diplomat generals Rome ever produced, had cornered Philip in Thessaly. 2 armies of roughly equal size were maneuvering blind through the summer heat, each searching for the other. Then, on the morning of the battle, a thick fog rolled over the hills known as Cynoscephalae, the dogs' heads, and neither side knew the other was there. At dawn on that June morning, Philip pushed a screening force, light infantry, Thracian mercenaries, and Macedonian cavalry, up onto the ridge to secure high ground. Flamininus, camped a few miles south, sent his own screen up the same slope. Neither commander knew the other had done it. Through the fog on the crest of the dogs' heads, the 2 screening forces walked into each other. A brutal, confused skirmish exploded across the ridge. The Romans were pushed back. Flamininus fed in reinforcements, 500 cavalry, 2,000 light infantry, including a contingent of Aetolian Greek allies. Now the Macedonians were the ones giving ground. Messengers came galloping down to Philip. He faced the choice every commander dreads, commit or withdraw. He did not know the full Roman strength. He did not know the ground on the far side of the ridge, but his men were winning and momentum was pulling him forward. He gave the order that would destroy his kingdom. He committed the phalanx. Philip led the right wing personally, the elite phalangites, the men trained for this moment their entire lives. 16,000 pikemen advanced up the reverse slope in tight formation, marching to their piper's beat, the forest of sarissas lowering as they cleared the crest. When they came down on the Roman left, the effect was catastrophic. The Roman line bent, then broke. Legionaries who had just been chasing skirmishers found themselves facing a wall of iron points advancing at a slow, unstoppable walk. They died in rows. The Roman left wing began to disintegrate. If this is landing, save this video. You will want to come back to this one because what happens next is one of the most instructive tactical moments in all of ancient warfare. But here is what the standard tellings leave out. Philip's success on the right had a hidden cost. His left wing, the second half of the phalanx, was still climbing the ridge. It had not yet formed. It was strung out, disordered, some units still in marching column, elephants and light troops mixed in with the pikemen. Flamininus saw it. He galloped across the field past the wreckage of his own left and personally led the Roman right, reinforced with his war elephants, straight into the Macedonian left wing before it could deploy. The elephants smashed through the disorganized phalangites. The maniples poured into the gaps. It became a slaughter, but this was not yet a victory. It was a draw. Philip's right was still advancing, still crushing the Roman left. If Philip could just hold on his other flank, he could still win the day by breaking through and taking the Roman camp. And now we come to the moment that changed history. The moment historians have argued about for 2,000 years because Polybius, our main source who was born 15 years later and interviewed veterans of the battle, tells us the man who did this was a military tribune. A junior officer, not a consul, not a legate, a tribune, and Polybius never gives us his name. This unnamed tribune, commanding the reserve maniples on the victorious Roman right, looked across the field. He saw Philip's phalanx grinding forward into the Roman left, its back exposed, its flanks unprotected because the phalanx cannot turn. A sarissa is 7 meters long. 16 ranks of men holding those pikes cannot pivot 90 degrees on broken ground without collapsing the whole formation. He made a decision no manual authorized him to make. Without orders from Flamininus, he detached 20 Maniples, roughly 2,400 legionaries, from the victorious right wing. He wheeled them 180 degrees, and he marched them straight into the rear of Philip's advancing Phalanx. The Macedonian Phalangites never saw it coming. Their eyes were fixed forward. Their pikes were pointed forward. Their entire universe was the 10 meters of ground in front of them where the Roman left was collapsing. Then Roman gladiae started punching through their backs. A Phalangite in the rear ranks could not turn. His sarissa was too long, too heavy, and the man behind him was pressing into his shoulders. When the 20 Maniples hit that formation from behind, the Macedonians could not fight. They could only die. The rear ranks were butchered where they stood. The pressure on the front collapsed as men in the middle tried to turn, dropped their sarissas, and were cut down by the legionaries they had been pushing back moments earlier. Some Macedonians threw down their weapons and raised their pikes upright, the ancient signal for surrender. Roman legionaries, drunk on adrenaline and vengeance for their broken comrades, did not recognize it. They kept killing. Flamininus himself had to gallop through the ranks screaming for quarter before the massacre stopped. The numbers are staggering. Macedonian dead, approximately 8,000. Macedonian prisoners, 5,000. Roman dead, 700. In a battle between roughly equal forces on ground that had initially favored the Macedonians in a fight where Philip's own right wing had actually broken the Roman line, the Phalanx suffered a 10-to-1 casualty ratio and ceased to exist as an effective fighting force. Philip V himself escaped with a small cavalry escort, riding hard for Larissa. On the road, he burned every royal document he was carrying, a king trying to erase the evidence of his own destruction. Behind him, on the dogs' heads, 12,000 of his best men were dead or in chains. But that was only the immediate result. What happened next defied every rule of what everyone thought they knew about ancient warfare. Because the moment the news reached Greece, and then Rome, and then every court from Pergamon to Alexandria, one uncomfortable truth became inescapable. The Phalanx, the formation of Alexander, the formation that had conquered the known world, could be beaten. Not by a genius, not by trickery, not by overwhelming numbers, by a system, by flexibility, by a junior officer with the initiative to detach 20 Maniples without waiting for orders. Every general in the Mediterranean started asking the same question. If Rome could do that to Philip, what happens when Rome comes for us? The strategic consequences arrived like a hammer. Within a year, Philip V had signed the Treaty of Tempe. Macedon was stripped of its Greek possessions, forced to pay 1,000 talents in indemnity, reduced to a rump kingdom in the north. Its fleet was surrendered. Its army was capped. The kingdom that Alexander had used as a springboard to conquer the world was finished as a great power. At the Isthmian Games in 196 BC, Flamininus made the announcement that made him a legend. Standing before the assembled Greek cities, he declared that Rome would withdraw its garrisons and that the Greeks would be free from Macedon, free from Persian influence, free under Roman friendship. The crowd reportedly cheered so loudly that ravens flying overhead fell dead from the sky. It was a masterstroke of propaganda, and it locked Greek loyalty to Rome for a generation. But the deeper consequence was doctrinal. For 30 years after Cynoscephalae, every remaining Phalanx power tried to adapt. Antiochus III of the Seleucid Empire, who ruled from modern Turkey to Afghanistan, believed his Phalanx was better than Philip's, his commanders more experienced, his men more numerous. He got his answer at Magnesia in 190 BC. Rome shattered him. 70,000 Seleucids engaged, 50,000 dead or captured. Roman losses under 400. Perseus, Philip's son, spent his entire reign rebuilding the Macedonian army. He believed he had solved the Phalanx problem, that he could hold flat ground and refused to fight on broken terrain. At Pydna in 168 BC, the Roman commander Aemilius Paulus watched his front line get pushed back by a Macedonian Phalanx on perfect ground, and then he saw exactly what that unnamed tribune had seen at Cynoscephalae. Gaps, unevenness, a formation that could not adjust. Roman centurions poured Maniples into every seam. 20,000 Macedonians died in an hour. Macedon ceased to exist as a kingdom. 3 battles, Cynoscephalae, Magnesia, Pydna, 29 years, and a military system that had dominated the ancient world since the time of Philip II was extinct. The lesson every professional soldier extracted from these battles, and that shaped Western military thinking for 2,000 years afterwards, was that formation is only as good as its flexibility. A weapon system that cannot adapt to the ground it fights on, to the enemy it faces, to the changing circumstances of a real battle, is not a weapon. It is a coffin. The Roman legion of Cynoscephalae is the direct ancestor of every modern combined arms doctrine. The idea that small units, empowered to make independent decisions, exercising initiative without waiting for orders from above, will beat larger and technically superior forces. That idea starts on the dogs' heads. That unnamed tribune is the spiritual ancestor of every non-commissioned officer taking his squad around a flank in Fallujah or Bakhmut, which raises the question historians still cannot answer. Who was he? Polybius does not tell us. Livy, writing a century later, does not tell us. The most consequential tactical decision of the Second Macedonian War was made by a man whose name is lost forever. Some scholars have argued he was deliberately erased, that Flamininus, jealous of a subordinate stealing his glory, ordered the tribune's role downplayed in official dispatches. Others believe Polybius simply did not know, that in the chaos of the aftermath the story of a junior officer got lost while the consul took the credit. We will never know for certain, but every time a small unit leader on a modern battlefield acts on his own initiative because his commander cannot see what he sees, that tribune is with him. CTA 1213 Min. If you want more stories like this, the tactical decisions that shaped history, the battles where one moment changed everything, the commanders who broke the rules and won, subscribe and hit the bell icon. New battle every Wednesday. Drop in the comments, which side do you think had the better strategy at Cynoscephalae? Philip's massed Phalanx attack, or Flamininus letting his tribune improvise? I read every one. Outro 1315 Min. 2,223 years ago, on a fog-shrouded ridgeline in northern Greece, a system that had ruled the ancient world for 150 years died in an afternoon. Not because it was inferior, not because the men who wielded it were cowards, but because the enemy it faced had built something better, a formation that trusted its junior officers to think. The Phalanx was rigid. The legion was alive. Every great military transformation in history follows the same pattern. Someone builds a perfect answer to the last war. Then a smaller, more flexible enemy learns to exploit the seams. The knight fell to the longbow. The armored column fell to the anti-tank guided missile. The aircraft carrier fell, or is about to fall, to the hypersonic missile. Cynoscephaly is the ancient world's warning that no weapon is permanent, and no doctrine survives contact with an opponent who has learned to adapt faster than you have. If this one hit, my video on the Battle of Pydna, where Aemilius Paulus finally ended Macedon forever and the Roman legion completed its extermination of the Phalanx, will blow your mind. It is the sequel to this story, and it is one of the most brutal tactical demonstrations in ancient history. In June 197 BC, on a fog-shrouded ridgeline in Thessaly called Cynoscephalae, the Dogs' Heads, the Roman legion under Titus Quinctius Flamininus, and the Macedonian Phalanx under King Philip V collided in the decisive battle of the Second Macedonian War. For a century and a half, the Phalanx had been undefeated. In one afternoon, it was shattered. 8,000 Macedonians died, 5,000 were captured, Roman losses were 700. And the decision that broke Philip's army was made not by Flamininus, but by an unnamed military tribune who took 20 Maniples and hit the Phalanx from behind, the single most consequential tactical improvisation in ancient warfare. This is the full story of how Rome solved the Phalanx problem, why Alexander's formation finally failed, and how one moment of initiative on the Dogs' Heads ended Macedon and made Rome the master of the Mediterranean. Chapters 00, 00 the unbeaten formation 01, 30 Sarissa versus Gladius 04, 00 the fog on the Dogs' Heads 06, 30 the tribunes 20 Maniples 09, 00 the death of the Phalanx 12, 00 why it still matters military history, ancient history, Roman Empire battle war history.